Welcome to Techwire, a conversation about government, politics, and technology. My name is Christina Gagnier, and today I'm joined by Alex Castro, the president and Corp. Alex, thank you so much for joining me.
Oh, my pleasure.
So one of the big themes of the CIO Academy is this transition. As we have baby boomers leaving the statewide workforce, you're seeing millennials come in, and there is this transition issue of how do you foster leadership with this new cadre of leaders. Maybe you could reflect on that a little bit.
Yeah, absolutely. I think one of the challenges that's happened over the years is that the people who are up and coming in service haven't had the exposure in the past that the current leaders had when they were coming up through service. And as a result, they're really trying to learn on the fly a lot of the issues in terms of how to be a complete leader within state government, understanding budgeting processes, understanding legislative processes, not only just the departmental, especially with, even with the accounting changes going on now. So being engrossed in having those elements available to them hasn't been as easy as it was in years past. And so as a result, folks are coming in and trying to learn it. One of the things that they're trying to really also understand is how to mitigate what risks they have in entering into program decisions, technology decisions, and things like that. And one of the things that we really advocate is being able to measure that availability of understanding within the organization as part of the risk model. So not just looking at what's the right business case with the best pro forma that says this is a good project to invest in, but can we deliver this as an organization? And before we make that decision, let's fix our operational areas that are going to be dependent into those projects, and that's going to take leadership. So it's understanding how to manage, right? How do we manage resources well? Because projects are dependent on good management. How is our decision-making processes? What things are we looking at in terms of organizational adaptability? A lot of people look at and say, hey, we're going to do organizational change. Well, really, how far can the organization adapt to a solution that they're doing? And that's driven by leadership. Those are things that I think that right now the leadership is going to have significant challenges in, is understanding how far to take and make that change happen in government with the rotation of people leaving service, and you have trying to draw new blood into service and really continuing that model. So it's a balancing act in the sense that in today's world, you don't have as much time as you used to. And so as a result, the progressions that people would have to go through in their careers they don't have the amount of time to go through those progressions before they get thrown into a very robust situation where you may be dealing with $1 billion project. Right? $1 billion project is not that unheard of these days anymore. So now you're not only being tested as an individual, you're being tested as a leader, understanding what functions and operations aren't working well, fixing those before making those commitments to move forward, understanding how to work up into the other organizational components of everything from finance to legislative to programmatic, and marrying all of that together, I think, is some of the larger challenges that they're facing. And the state is really doing some great investment in terms of its ITLA classes and others to get people up to speed, and it's going to take a holistic perspective on how to really not force leaders to make unilateral decisions on things, but how can they get better data, use data-driven decision modeling to help them in those decision processes, and then taking that and leading with that.
This sounds like a very unique skills gap. It's not necessarily the hard skills that might be missing with some of these new leaders. It's those soft skills, those leadership skills that just take time to develop. Outside of things like ITLA, and as you are a partner, from the private sector, you're a partner with the government, what are some things that can be done to help accelerate that professional growth for those millennial leaders?
Really, I think that the millennial challenge comes in the level of expectation and the pace of that those individuals work. And I think that's the largest part of conflict, right? Is you have, within state service, you have veteran folks who are working within a construct that they're very used to. And they're used to really moving projects at a certain pace. The challenge is that you have external forces on these things, such as constituent need, legislative need, perception of, if Google can put it out, why can't we put it out, right? And that puts immense amount of pressure on trying to get something to work. Then they're having to do contract management with vendors. Those types of things those dynamics didn't exist at the level of intensity and pace and the scale of impact that they were 30 years ago. I mean, they were significant then, but today the pace is just crazy. Even in industry, the pace is, there's so many challenges that they face in being able to make these decisions that fast. leadership in the state is going to take a different perspective, that somebody doesn't own one thing all the time. It's going to be, how do I gather data that I can then rely on to be able to make better decisions, and then be trained in those areas to make those better. It's going to be about mentorship, it's about taking leadership classes and guidance in that, but it's also hands-on experience, being in the trenches, making the mistakes, not being afraid of that mistake, learning from it, using it as a leverage piece to then go on, but then how much more data are you gathering out of operations to be able to make those decisions better without repeating the mistakes. And I think that's the biggest thing that's not been in practice, is the amount of data available to leaders so that they can make more data-driven decisions.
I mean, knowing how to iterate is very important, and I think one space where there's probably a need to, for some iteration is actually in hiring and recruiting millennials. I mean, you just mentioned Google.
Right.
They have problems finding IT workforce, and so if you're the government and you're competing against a Google or a Facebook or the private sector, what can government do to make sure that they're recruiting that next group of public sector leaders?
The people who work in public sector that I've found and I've met over the years are people who have come into state service because they really believe in providing value to the constituency. They want to make a difference, and really that is the unique selling proposition of working for the state of California, because you can actually impact people's lives on a day-to-day basis. That is a huge thing that very other entities can offer, even in private sector. To go to Google, yeah, it's neat and you get to do all the Google type stuff, but that is a different way of looking at a more commercialized view of it. Within state service, it's much more pure in the sense of I'm really affecting how well somebody's health is, or how they live their lives, and what their children are going to benefit and what their grandchildren are going to benefit. And that's a legacy that people take away. Bringing millennials in has to have an adjustment in the management style of the existing workforce to say, look, the pace of decision making is faster, their expectations as professionals are very different from what we had. How do we begin to marry a little bit of each of the worlds into a better model for operating? And that can come again from data-driven decision making, but also understanding, let's incrementally fix how we operate, so as we enter into that new decision, that we're making it on a solid basis, we know what we're getting into, we're going into it eyes wide open, and we're embracing what's coming rather than trying to deflect and deal with the risk that way. And throwing people into that mix, that's when they're going to start to gain those experiences, but on a positive way rather than trial by fire and we'll see where you come out on the other end.
Well, Alex, thank you for joining me again in our discussion of workforce challenges, and I think actually more so opportunities for government.
Absolutely. Great. My pleasure.
And thank you to our audience once again joining us in a conversation about government, politics, and technology.